So the other thing that I think is really important in the contracts, in consultancies, and not everyone does this, but I really do it, is you get exclusivity. So the reason they pay you 6 figures or more is because they're getting you in their market segment. So I'm really conscious of once I have someone, like right now I have a client that's in the mass market, like teenage girl segment. I have someone who's in the like 20 to 30 segment, and their price point's like the Mark by Mark, like co-op bridge brand. And then I have a high-end person. And then I also have a sports brand. So none of those consultancies compete with each other. They don't share the same demographic. They don't share the same price points. So I can ethically work for all of them and have exclusivity. So they know, like, part of what they're paying for is for me not to be their competitor, which is really, really valuable. And sometimes I have to point that out. Like, look, you guys know I'm exclusive with you right now as long as we have a contract. You know, and that way they know. It's like, because I do get their competition calling and saying, oh, we're really, you know, they call the agency, like, we're really interested in Sally. Like, look at what she's doing for this brand. We want her to come here. And they're like, well, she's on contract. So you can kind of start to leverage that for future contracts if you're good. If you're able to create the results. Because that's the other thing, right? Is when you get hired for a consultancy, after you go in, you show them a taste of the inspiration you would do for them. You first, but before you even do that, you listen to their concerns about what they want to do with their brand. You kind of, usually I have to do a lot of problem solving, and after listening to them talk about kind of why they're hiring you, you really have to find out, is that it? Or is there something else going on? Like, you know, because usually I can look at a brand who's hiring me and their message, their like marketing message, like their advertisements and all that kind of stuff, they don't make any sense to me. You know, like they're just hiring some photographer that has nothing to do with the model, that has nothing to do with the styling, that has like a random shoe, and you're just kind of like, none of it makes sense. You know, and usually they're missing some sort of story or someone to hold story for them, or like hold their voice and really make sure it goes through every element of the show, which is what we do, you know? It's like, that's what we do on runway shows, which we'll talk about later. It's like, that's the really fun part of it, is you hold a story through everything, the music, the set design, like everything. So after you meet with them and you kind of figure out you know what you think's missing, it's like that's when you devise a strategy. Usually there's 2 to 3 meetings before you get hired for these consultancies, because it's a lot of money, you know? So they want to make sure that you know what you're talking about and that the kind of strategies you bring to the table is what they're looking for. So that's when I go back and start to design a strategy of, here's what I would do if you hired me. And so these are the kind of photographers I would bring in. And that's when I give them like a taste of the inspiration in the presentation. Like these are the hair and makeup people I would suggest. These are the kind of collaborations. These are the kind of artists and designers I would bring to collaborate on this line, if that's part of the story. This is the kind of runway show I would do, because sometimes they include, like, sometimes it's advertising and, you know, advertorial. Sometimes it's just in-house. Sometimes it's just web. Sometimes it's a runway show. Sometimes it's just research, which is very fun. You know, I'll make a list of like what I'll do for them shopping. Like, oh, where would I go and shop? What would I bring in? And I do all that list. And then that's usually, you either get the yes or the no to move ahead with the consultancy. And then once I get there, it's like, I'm in a situation again that I can fulfill. I have to be competent to do what I said I was gonna do. So I'm really careful before I start throwing out names, and it's like, oh, okay, this is the photographer I'd like to hire. I'm really careful that I actually have a relationship with that person, and because I've seen it happen. I haven't done that because I learned. You know, I learned with when I messed up on the budget thing, I was like, oh, okay, don't commit to things that that I can't actually fulfill on. So, I mean, it's a big part of consultancies. I've seen it happen to 2 or 3 friends of mine where they couldn't hold you, because you have to hold the structure. You know, like because we're stylists and the way we've learned and we've assisted and the way we interned and everything is like, we're on these fast, quick-paced jobs, right? And we're putting out fires. And then suddenly you're in a consultancy, and then you have to create your own structure to be able to continue to do the work over and over and over again, and not let them just fall by the side while you're doing these other, putting out all these, because you're still working on the other stuff that you work on. You're still, even when you have the consultancies, you're still doing commercial jobs. I mean, until you're doing Chanel, Prada, and something else, you know what I mean? You're still doing your consultancy and holding other commercial jobs as well as your editorial, because you're still building your career. So it's figuring out how to juggle everything as well as take care of the consultancy and be within your contract. Because when they negotiate the contract, they negotiate your project fee based on how many days you can give them for that year or that month. I mean, excuse me, that 6 months. So you have to make sure that you're holding the time. And I saw a friend of mine who got an amazing, huge contract, and I was like, oh, that is amazing. How did you do that? You know, and then 6 months, not even 6, it was like 3 months in, they fired him because he couldn't hold his time. He couldn't turn down other things to make sure that the work was being taken care of for the consultancy he had. He wasn't showing up for the consultancy, and we just happened to have a mutual friend who worked at the designer he had a consultancy with, and he couldn't deliver. He would make promises when he was in there meeting with them that wouldn't, he never delivered the inspiration. And it's like, you have to, because we're not working on these crazy timelines, you know, it's like you have to be able to create the processes to take care of the contract and the consultancy as well as fulfill on them. And I just, you know, it seems so simple, but it's really hard. For me, it was really hard when I first got into consultancy because I was just so used to putting out fires. And my agent is going to keep me working as much as she can. So because he's getting, you know, if I'm getting paid, he's getting paid more days at work, the more money he makes, so we're all happy. But, you know, it started to be, even with the agency, it's like, he's got me booked, and I'm like, okay, we got to put in these 4 days, and then we move those 4 days back more because I would get another big job there. And so and then I had to start going, no, these 4 days can't move. Like, they're sealed in, they're locked in. And then going and doing it, and then also remembering, sitting, and I had to, because I start to get really excited when I'm working with design teams, and I start making crazy promises. You know, I'm like, oh my God, because I start thinking about, I have an archive, and we'll talk about archives of business organization tomorrow. So I have an archive of stuff I've been collecting for 15 years now, clothes, amazing, Comme des Garçons, but even weird old Levi's, 70s Levi's, and it's so great to keep everything that you buy, seriously. Anything that could be, because you'll use it, you'll use it again. And I'd sit there in these meetings and I'd start promising I'm gonna get this from the archive and that from the archive and da-da-da-da-da, and I'm talking, and of course I'm not writing it down because I'm in this whole moment. And so I started to have my assistant, either I'd put a tape recorder on the table to record the conversation so I could make sure that I was keeping my commitments, or I'd have an assistant there marking everything down. Because it just started to get out of control. I was like, I'm gonna go shopping here, and because I would get so excited, so excited. So, you know, and I had to really create new processes for myself and new practices for me and my assistant team to keep all my commitments and to fulfill on them. Because, I mean, it's all great and good if you're charismatic and inspirational while you're there for your days, but if you don't bring in everything that you say you're gonna bring in, you lose the contract quick.